Oh crap, I've got yourself on this. Oh, come on here,
What happens here?
yeah. I've done this for YouTube as well. There you go. That's how you make the chocolate, do not eat them in the dish.
Lovely, I think we'll get started. So, have any of you been to Camberwell before?
Yeah.
One or two of us? Okay, so whether you've been to Camberwell before or whether this is your first time, a very warm welcome to Camberwell, more importantly the chocolate making section, the best section of them all. What I'm going to be doing for you today is a little bit of a demonstration on how chocolate was made over 120 years ago. We're taking a trip back in time to when chocolate was made completely by hand. Nowadays we have the machinery that will do the bulk of the work for us. But this used to be done completely by hand, Monday through to Saturday. Monday to Friday they would do this for 8 hours a day. On Saturdays they would do it for 4 hours a day. And on Sundays they would have the day off, luckily. I'm going to show you how they used to do this and make chocolate for the country and the rest of the world. So the first thing they would need to do is get their hands on some melted chocolate, of course. Behind me here I have a melting machine which is melting chocolate at just under 45 degrees.
Oh my goodness.
Now that is too hot to be made straight into chocolate. If I was to take this melted chocolate, put it into one of these moulds and into the fridge without doing anything to it first, it would taste very poor in terms of the Cadbury chocolate you're used to eating, and it would also be very poor in terms of texture. So I'm going to need to cool down this chocolate before I can do anything else. I'm going to start off by holding this nice and high and pouring it into a big pile on the table. Now I'm pouring this onto marble. Marble as a material is quite cold to touch, so that's going to help me cooling the chocolate down. And the process we use to cool the chocolate down is a process called tempering. Now we're going to be doing some hand tempering for you today. We have tempering machines in all the factories, but they used to do this completely by hand. It was a very simple process. To start with, they'd get their palette knife and spread their chocolate out left to right, make sure it's nice and evenly spread on the table, no big lumps or anything. And then once they'd spread it out, they'd push it along, lift and spread. And they do this roughly 3 to 4 times depending on how hot the chocolate was. They want to get it to around 27 to 28 degrees is the perfect temperature. And the more we spread out the chocolate, the thicker it gets in texture, which is a good sign it's cooling down. And we're keeping the crystals moving around inside the chocolate, which is keeping the cocoa butter moving, which is what keeps the chocolate nice and shiny, and gives it that snap. Now the way they used to check the temperature of their chocolate is different to how we do it today. Today, within all the machines, they'll have thermometers which will check the temperature, so they'll know if it's too hot or too cold or just right. They didn't used to have thermometers, so they'd adopt a variety of methods. They might have put some on their wrist, might have tasted it, or they might have dipped their finger into the chocolate to see if it was too hot or too cold. That feels nice and cool down to me. Which means we can now get our moulds. I've got a dairy milk mould here. Gather up all of our tempered chocolate like so, and start to fill in the gaps on the top. I'm going to try and not create too much mess. Like so. Get that all on the top. And then I can use my fishtail to fill in some of the gaps. Like so. I'm going to leave one without any chocolate in just so it doesn't get too messy, because the next part might get a bit messy. But I'm going to clean my scraper so I can clean the mould. And whilst I'm cleaning the mould, I'll explain the next part of the process to you. And the next part of the process is getting rid of the trapped air. Now this part is very important to determine the quality of the chocolate. If you have too much trapped air inside your chocolate when it comes to set, you may end up with some inconsistencies in your chocolate. There might be some holes in it when it sets, which means it wouldn't be able to be sold in the shop. So this part is very important to determine the quality of your chocolate cubes. So I'm going to start off by tapping it on the table like so. Now if you look closely, you may be able to see those air bubbles that have risen to the top. That's a good sign that trapped air is escaping. You want to get as many of them to the top as possible. And what that will have done is any of the bubbles at the top, it will have popped them, so there should be as little damage done to the chocolate as possible.
No.
Now I'm going to do another check to make sure everything's gone nice and smoothly so far. What I'm going to do is I'm going to tip this over my head. Now if I've made any mistakes at all, such as if I've not done the tempering right or I've not got rid of the trapped air, then I might get covered head to toe in chocolate. But if I've done everything right so far, I should be absolutely fine. I'm hoping I've made no mistakes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to 3, 2, 1, and as you can see, when I hold it over my head for a prolonged period of time, it all sticks to the bottom of the mold, nothing comes flying up. Which means everything's gone smoothly so far. Like I said, if I'd have made any big mistakes with the tempering or anything like that, it would have all fallen out in clumps and I'd have got covered in chocolate, which I'm glad I haven't. Now if we wanted plain dairy milk chocolate, this could go into the fridge to finally set. If you wanted to put any inclusions in, things like caramel or things like that, you can use a process called shelling to make that space. This involves tipping it on its side and giving it some taps. You'll get a little bit of chocolate rain as a result, making space on the inside of the filling, making space on the inside of the mould for the filling rather. The more we tap out, the more filling we can include. So eventually, when we flip it upside down, we've got some nice pockets where we can put the filling onto the inside of the mould. Now unfortunately, this chocolate is demonstration chocolate. What that means is it is recycled over and over again to avoid any wastage. So for that reason, this chocolate is not safe to eat. So I'm not going to be putting any filling onto the inside of this mould. I'm going to put it aside to set for a while. What they would do, they would get a pipe bag and they'd fill in each of the individual cubes, layer it over the top with some more chocolate, and then give the mould a bit of a clean. It's very important to make sure the front of your mould is clean especially, because if there's too much chocolate touching the lines between the cubes, it might be harder to tap the cubes out. So if you're ever doing this at home, always make sure you clean the mould before you put it to set. Now it can go in the fridge where it's going to take about 1 hour before it's ready. Now 120 years ago, they didn't really have fridges, so they'd put their chocolate in a cold, dark room or maybe in a Victorian ice house. As long as it was cold and dark, it would have been useful to set the chocolate. Now, all the moulds they used to use 120 years ago were metallic moulds, ones like this, which obviously weren't see-through. They had to be very accurate with their timings. But luckily for us, we have the power of see-through moulds, and we can look on the back and notice that the chocolate has got generally darker in colour, which is the good sign that it is set and ready to go. If you can see any darkening in colour or any condensation marks, those are 2 good signs that the chocolate's set. Now whoever put this mould in did forget to get rid of a little bit of the chocolate on the top, which means it might be a bit harder to tap out these cubes. But the bottom's looking pretty clean, so hopefully, if I give this a little bit of a twist, we should be able to get some out in the end. There we go. Now they'd inspect these cubes once they've tapped out several of the moulds and see if they were good enough quality to be made into chocolate bars. If they were too damaged, they might have given them out to the workers for free again to avoid any wastage. Now you may be very disappointed that you can't eat this chocolate, but I have got some good news for you. Just around the corner is our servery, where you're going to get a little pot of melted dairy milk chocolate and some fillings to go with it. So thank you very much for listening everyone. Whenever you're ready, you can start to make your way around the corner to the servery.
There you go.